Good morning, and this is Canada Day on Church at Home with Rachael. This morning, I am tackling this big question about what do we do with Canada Day in recognition that we are a country in mourning, we are a country in confusion, we are a nation that is torn between what does it mean to be a nation and what does it mean to be a nation specifically in 2021, acknowledging the truth of our reality between pandemics and unmarked graves and the call for reconciliation that has been coming for hundreds of years, has been coming for the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and is now coming full on like a tsunami right now. I have been giving this a lot of prayer and a lot of thought. How do I talk about Canada Day? A year ago, if I was doing this, I would probably just talk about how hard it is to be having Canada Day in a pandemic. And yet here we are today with so many things on the looming on the horizon, so many things that are currently present for us, and we're really struggling to understand what it means to be a Canadian, what it means to be a member of this country, a citizen of this country. For some people, there's no question. They're just whatever. This is Canada Day. We should be celebrating. And to them, I say, give your head a shake. If you are a Canadian, in my sense of what it is to be a Canadian, it means that we stand together and we have compassion and empathy for the other. And that means that every Canadian, whether they are pre-contact Canadians or post-contact Canadians. I am referring to Canadian as every single person who lives on what is now acknowledged by the world to be Canada, however we appreciate or not appreciate that term. So for all of you who are out there, I do consider you my siblings, my brothers and sisters, my siblings in creation in this place that is traditionally not traditionally, that is known as Canada by the bulk of the world. So that's where I'm coming from today. But I have to recognize, I think I'm going to suggest that maybe I'm going to think of Canada Day the way I think of Remembrance Day. Remembrance Day is, in some places in this country, it's a day off school, a day off work. It is, for some people, it's a holiday because it's a statutory holiday. And they treat it as such. It's an extra day to go visit friends, to hang out, to sleep in, things like that. For some people, it is a day of mourning, a tragic day of mourning when we remember all of our brothers and sisters, all of those people from this nation, in whatever state you wish to think of it, who offered of themselves their lives, many of whom went overseas to places they'd never heard of or maybe only studied in school, places where they couldn't pronounce the name of the town, let alone speak the language of the people who live there, who went there to fight for a greater cause, that there might be peace, there might be democracy, that people might not be gathered up and placed in institutions, stripped of their identity, and told that who they were was wrong, that they were not loved by God by the way for who they were, and tortured and killed in the Holocaust, in pogroms, in so many different ways that the atrocities of war seem to invite people to tag along and do the worst. We had hundreds of thousands of people from across Canada, Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike, immigrants and non-immigrants alike, volunteer to go and serve for king and country. And on Remembrance Day, we remember them. We remember those who fell, those who were killed overseas, who were killed in battle and could not come home. We honor those who did, and we remember that they carry with them the scars of that time. And we do not denigrate that. There have been times when we have argued about poppies and maybe we shouldn't have Remembrance Day. And for some reason, when the time comes around, those calls for pacifism and how honoring Remembrance Day is such a horrible way, because all it does is it states that we really believe in war when it doesn't. What it states is that we believe that war should never happen again. And this remembering is our way of making sure that happens. And so I'm thinking of this Canada Day as that. I'm thinking of this day as a day of celebration, a day when we celebrate the fact that we live in a country that at least makes an effort, maybe not as much of an effort, not maybe, we do not make as much of an effort as we need to for every single one of our citizens, for things like health care, clean water, safety in their homes, appropriate care of children who need to be or have to be or who have found themselves without familial care in our systems, in our Children's Aid Society, in our children's protection societies. We are learning between social media, the news, and people being willing to step up and speak out. We are learning that we are failing in many ways for these things. We have communities in this country. We have First Nations communities that do not have, nor never have had, potable water. And here in Wainwright, our reservoir is down to 60%, and we are not, we're turning on splash pads for Canada Day, but they're being turned off again to conserve water. But if we got to the point where we had to say, we have no potable water, you can bet your booty that we would be doing something to demand that we have potable water, that we can have showers and we can drink the water from the tap and we can make our coffee in the morning. And we would fight and we'd be angry and we would pay the taxes we need to pay to make sure the problem gets resolved. And yet, in reserve communities across this country, to the north and other places, there are places that are still struggling to even be heard. Promises made that we will get them water lines, we will get them good, clean water, and those promises have not been met by any government, not just the current one. These are all things that on Canada Day we must remember. We celebrate the fact that we are working toward being a country that can stand proud that we treat all of our citizens with dignity and respect. But we also recognize that we are not that country yet. We have a long way to go. I think that for people who are struggling with flying the flag today, for people who are choosing to desecrate the flag, I ask you why. The flag does not mean that we have it perfectly. Flying the Canadian flag does not imply that we are a perfect nation. It implies that we are a nation becoming. We are people who are willing to look to one symbol and say, you know what, the things that it stands for, like universal health care, like a vote for every single person over the age of 18, for education for every child, good, solid education, not biased, not watered down, not implicit racism built in, but good, solid, honest, real education for every child. Those are the things that I think of when I look at our flag. Those are the things I know that we have to continue to work toward. And now I'd like to say, when I look at the flag, I look at it as something out there. I look at it as a promise, as a goal, as an opportunity for me and for our community to do better. That it is the ideal. That flag stands for me as an opportunity for peoples and for peoples of Indigenous and non-Indigenous backgrounds, for people who are immigrants, for people who simply are here because this has always been their home for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, or people who have chosen to make this their home for hundreds of years or for decades or yesterday. This is a place where we can choose to come together to work toward that goal of that flag that flies down the road. The flag that flies in a place where we can say, as we walk together listening to one another's stories, acknowledging the pain and the hurt that we have caused, acknowledging that we have pain and hurt that we need to share. Pre-contact people have pain The survivors of residential schools have stories that need to be told, and they need to be told often enough that they become a story that we are all aware of. I understand there are many people who were not paying attention, and I confess I was one of them that didn't pay as much attention as I should have when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission took the show on the road and gave the whole country opportunities to come together to listen, and gave residential school survivors opportunities to speak as we listened. That work has been done, but it hasn't been completed because the rest of us who didn't pay attention still need to pay attention. That work is not completed because there are still stories that need to be told. Telling your once is not enough. When I deal with people who are grieving, who have lost a grandfather or a parent or a sibling or a spouse, I know that the stories that they tell me when I meet with them in their home before the funeral, the stories that they tell at the funeral and at the visitations, the stories they tell at the reception afterward, and in the gatherings on birthdays and Christmases and celebrations of every, that go on for years, those stories continue to be told. And sometimes the stories change because the healing has begun, but the story we cannot expect that person will share that story of grief once and say, okay, I'm done. The stories they have need to be told over and over and over, not for our sake, for those who are listening, but for the sake of those who are speaking. It is a part of the grief process. It is a part of the healing process for us to tell our stories. And that flag, that Canadian flag with the maple leaf, a leaf that is indigenous itself to Canada, it's part of the creation that our Indigenous brothers and sisters have grown up with in this land. That flag is an invitation for us to sit down and to listen beneath it to the stories of people who are telling their stories. If there are people who feel they need to burn the flag or hang it upside down as a sign of distress or need to alter the flag, then those of us who don't understand or don't feel so compelled, we need to be patient. Getting angry, we know, does nothing. Getting frustrated stops the conversation. But if we are willing to acknowledge that there is some pain deep within the person who chooses to do that, deep within the person who chooses to put orange handprints on churches, deep within the people who are vandalizing and burning churches, when we acknowledge that pain, we at least begin the process of acknowledging that we need to listen. A friend of mine, Alex, whom I have known forever, and who has had his own struggles and his own very mature process to undergo in his own life over the years, asked me today, how are you going to deal with Canada Day? And he asked me if I know of any Indigenous people that I could talk to and say, give me advice. What do you think? And so I took Alex's advice and I called a friend. I reached out to a friend and he called me, or we called and we spoke on the phone. And this is a new friend, a friend I've only met on Facebook. His name is Fred. And I have had opportunity to listen to Fred speak, to listen to his stories a little bit, to see and witness from afar the work that he is doing in a community called the Frog Lake First Nation at Church of the Nativity. And I listened to him yesterday for a good long time on the phone. And I realized what a gift we have when we are willing to open our ears. What a gift we are given when others are willing to open their mouth and speak. Because Fred shared with me that this is not a simple, what does Canada Day mean? How can it be celebrated or not? This is a whole mix of emotions. There is no right way or wrong way to do Canada Day. We need to be honest with ourselves, but we also need to be willing to listen to other people's honesty for themselves as well. So today I'm not going to participate in fireworks. It's more about the fact that I never have enjoyed them than what it is. I am not thinking this day about how great Canada is, rah, 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 nor really have I ever on Canada Day. I will give lot of thought and prayer this day to the beauty that can be Canada, to the nation, the inclusive, all peoples nation that God is creating Canada to become. I don't think that any place or any institution or any group has it all together yet. We are not there. God's kingdom has not come on earth as it is in heaven, which means our work is not done. I do believe that Canada can become a beautiful, inclusive, listening, and sharing society of peoples who acknowledge the beauty of one another. But before we can do that, we also have to acknowledge the many ways that we have hurt one another, whether that is through the residential schools, by the Indian Act, by the doctrine of discovery, the things that a lot of us settlers, colonizers, people who are implicitly blessed or privileged by the systemic racism that we now need to dismantle, beginning with understanding and recognizing that it is there. We have hurt others, and we need to acknowledge that. We also need to acknowledge that others can hurt us, that a church being burned down by people who are angry or hurting hurts those people who call that place home. We need to acknowledge that regardless of which group we belong to, it is not okay to do unto others what was done. As painful as it may be, it is not okay for the indigenous peoples to then turn around and treat the non-indigenous peoples the way we treated them in the past. That will not solve any problems. Nor is it okay for the non-indigenous peoples to say, it's over. You know, our ancestors did it, get over it. That's not okay. What is okay is for all of us to be honest about how we're feeling, to come together in small groups, in large groups, as a nation, to say that we are one nation under God, but this one nation is made up of so many nations, indigenous nations, non-indigenous nations, people from Italy, people from Spain, people from Mexico, people from the States, people who have been here for so long they don't know where they were from before, and those people who have been here from the moment God placed them here. Canada Day is a day of confusion, and maybe that's okay. Maybe today is the day that we really focus on looking at the other and asking the question, what does Canada Day mean to you? And not judging their response, simply listening. Because I do believe that that is what we are called to do. We are all called to listen. We are all called to speak our truth, our experience, when it is our time to speak. And right now, I believe that it is the Indigenous time to speak. It is the time to speak for the residential school survivors. It is the time to speak for those who will speak for those whose voices were silenced by violence or by illness or whatever it was that caused them to be buried in unmarked graves. Their voices will be heard. But we need to be listening, be willing to listen. So this Canada Day, take some time to acknowledge that it is confusing and it is painful, and it can also be joyful, and it can be celebratory, much like Remembrance Day. Let us celebrate what it is that we can accomplish when we work together, what it is that Canada Day can be for us when we work together as members of communities walking in the same direction. A direction that means we have potable water, crystal clear education, truth and reconciliation, among other things. Let's look at Canada Day as an opportunity to move forward, as a call for justice for all of God's children. Let's look at this day as an opportunity to listen and to hear, to see in new ways. Let's look at this Canada Day as a day that we are called upon not to be angry with one another, but to begin the process of forgiveness, of reaching out, of acknowledgement. Today, I give thanks for Canada, because in this country, we can do that work. We can vote, we can protest, we can sing, we can rejoice, we can cry, because in this country, we have the freedom to do that. And for those who feel that they don't yet have that freedom in this country, we will work with you to make sure that you do. And so today, I wish you a blessed Canada Day. May this be a day of learning. May it be a day of hope. May it be a day of new relationships. May it be a day of thanksgiving. And today in particular, I give thanks to my friend Alex Sproat and my friend becoming Fred Matthews. God bless you both. And God bless all of you who are watching. Be safe, stay cool, drink lots of water, and I will see you again tomorrow for Friday Church at Home. God bless everybody.